the morning show here on the Rise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. In Nigeria, the country has inaugurated a national steering committee to oversee the development of the Nigeria Agenda 2050 and medium-term national development plan. The plan will succeed the Vision 2020 and the current economic recovery and growth plan. The committee for the new plan will be jointly chaired by entrepreneur, investment banker, and economist Atedo Peterside, as well as the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed. At the inauguration, President Muhammad Buhari said the plan will lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within the next 10 years. The president noted that it has become necessary to develop a successor plan to ensure continuity and efficiency in the country's development planning.
The main objectives of these successor plans are to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within the next 10 years, particularly given the World Bank's projection that Nigeria will become the world's third most populous country by 2050, with over 400 million people. In order to ensure a truly consultative, participatory, and inclusive planning process, the National Steering Committee will comprise representatives of one state governor from each of the 6 geopolitical zones, B, the Senate and House of Representatives, C, honorable ministers and representatives of key agencies, D, major political parties.
President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammad Buhari, Dr. Bati Rufai, developmental plans are never in short supply in Nigeria, and I think that the jury is still out on how effective these plans and policies have been. What will be different this time around?
Well, first, let us say that there is nothing wrong in planning for the future. Every country does it. Institutions, either multilateral or basic institutions, do it. I mean, we have Australia 2050. We have Agenda 2063 of the United Nations. You have
African
the
Union.
AU 2050 plan. So, you know, you have many of these things. But the important thing is about leadership. How do you translate those plans into concrete results? Now, Nigeria had the Vision 2020. I was a member of one of the technical committees. We held meetings in Abuja, going back and forth. At the end of the day, you know, I'm sure the reports were submitted. I don't see what we're doing ahead for 2050 that will be new. So I hope this particular effort will not end up as a talk shop, because when you attend those sessions, there's a lot of talking, a lot of writing. We present the report, but the question is, do our leaders refer to those documents? Do they have the resources? Do they have the will? I mean, this is Vision 2020, this is 2020. So that particular document, automatically ends this year. But if you look back, what did we achieve with the Vision 2020 document? That's the question that Nigerians will ask. But we've been told that the committee, the working groups, the steering committee will be all inclusive. In other words, it will be a participatory process. Every section of the community, of the society, will be able to make inputs, right? But again, President Buhari is thinking ahead for successive administrations that will come after. Okay, would they make use of the document that is produced, or they will set it aside for one reason or the other? So these are the issues. But for us to think and talk and think ahead, I don't have a problem with that. Considering the point also that the president made that by 2050, our population will be about 400 million.
Yes. And
the World Bank says for that even the population of Africa will triple by the year 2050. And, you know, about 25% or about half of that will be young people under the age of 25. Yeah. So if there is an explosion in population and we have a lot of young people going all over the Nigerian space, you have to plan ahead for them. No time frame was put to the work of the steering committee and the working groups. So I hope this is not going to be a permanent, long, open-ended exercise, because the issues we need to worry about as we plan for 2050, there are issues that are already, right there on the table, in our front.
Okay. I mean, for me, when it comes to plans, I'm not always excited when we have long-term plans.
Why so?
So I'll give you a couple of my reason for that. It's just like what is happening in France now. A lot of people are saying Macron put up Le Plan, just because he wants to placate people that are protesting that the economy isn't good. I mean, for me, the plans that have worked very well are plans that are short-term. And I'm going to use the Soviet Union as an example, and China. They always had 5-year plans. Brezhnev, Kerenko, all the other guys always had 5-year plans. And these were 5-year plans that they could activate. Even China, too, has 5-year plans. They plan every 5 years, look at the current realities, and adapt their plans to the current realities. I believe for every plan to work, I don't believe in long-term, it's going to happen in the next 20 years. And I give you this instance. I remember in 1996 or 97 when the talk about Vision 2010 started. Oh, well, a lot of people were looking, 2010 was just a long away, but it happened. And did we still reach that goal as regards literacy? I'm not sure we did. Primary school enrollment rate dropped tremendously. Primary school completion rate is about 60% in this country. And that was supposed to be a goal on literacy. I mean, if it's something 5 years we can do, implement, set up the committee, you are working by a 5-year clock, and achieve that on time. Secondly, in this plan, when the committee starts working, I want to see a grand infrastructural plan. It saddens my heart that Lagos, a big city like Lagos, 20 million population, is about only the biggest metropolis I know in the world that doesn't have a mass transit system like a train network that is constantly working in place. When Lagos population will triple by 2015 to about 40 million, it will be mayhem that we don't have a transport system in place, like train, like rails and metros and things like that. Look at other big cities in the world. So the plan must include something great about infrastructure and something to be able to engage the young people. In fact, I was reading a report that says Africa will be the biggest workforce of the world very soon, because we're going to train a lot of young people. How are we giving them skills?
But quickly before we go,
the
structure of a development plan is a roadmap. When it comes to the sections, in terms of deliverables, that will be broken down. What can be done short term, what can be done
medium term,
and then what can be done long term. So when they talk about 2050 or 2030 or 2063, it's just to define a roadmap. But even when that roadmap is defined, how do you deliver? Take the economic growth and recovery plan. It's just a 3-year plan. But 3 years later, what have we seen on the table? So that is the question. So in terms of, the roadmap, the plans, the timelines, and the deliverables, that should be measurable as we move towards that 2050.
How well will these plans deliver on those promises? Time will tell. And that's all on the news headlines. So we'll take a short break now. But when we return, we will have the trio of Rochus Ojiri, Michael Wilson, and Aaron Akerjola to give us updates on Africa, global business, as well as COVID-19. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News.
Right, our dependable Rotus Odiri is here to give us Africa business update. Over to you, Rotus.
All right, good morning, Doctor. Good morning, good morning, Rufai, and good morning, Adiswa.
Good morning.
Okay, so we ran out of time yesterday, So I want to just continue what we're talking about with regards to fuel. What should Nigerians be expecting to pay for fuel now that oil marketers can go and freely source for it and are not restricted by price bans from the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency? This is the 159 naira per litre price that we're seeing with the latest increase. Now, as far as a proxy, yesterday I put up a chart which maybe it was a little confusing because I was trying to use what proxy, based on other countries and the parameters that go into what it would cost to bring fuel into the country, would lead to what we would pay. Now, let's stay here for a second. Remember, on the show, we talked about Old Mutual, the insurance company in Zimbabwe, and how traders in Zimbabwe were using the stock price of Old Mutual on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which is the JSE, and the London Stock Exchange, which is the LSE, to determine what the actual dollar exchange rate should be in Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwe government reacted to this, aggressively, and now said Old Mutual should be taking off their stock exchange because, according to the government, traders were distorting the exchange rate. But let's look at what they did. If you look at Old Mutual on the JSE, that's the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the closing price as of yesterday in Rand was 1,155 Rand. That's the share price. The exchange rate is 16 Rand to a dollar. So if you divide 1,155 by 1663, you get a dollar share price of $69.45. If you take the same stock on the LSE, on the London Stock Exchange, the closing share price was £52.98. The exchange rate, as last I checked, was $1.30 to £1. So you multiply 52.98 by 130, you get $68.87. So you can see that the dollar share price, there is minimal difference between the share price in Johannesburg and the share price in London in dollar terms. So this is what traders in Zimbabwe were now using to say, okay, what is the actual exchange rate that we should be using to determine this new currency that Zimbabwe is putting out there? So using this as a framework, let's now go to fuel prices for Nigeria and look at some other African countries. So let's move on to our next slide here, where we've got a simple table, and let me explain what's happening here. Now, the global fuel prices I was using yesterday is a website that tracks fuel prices for countries around the world. I mentioned that even at 159 naira per liter, we are still have one of the lowest fuel prices in the world. So we're pegged at 39 cents per liter in dollars. The NAFEX rate closed at 386 naira per dollar yesterday. So you multiply that in naira, that fuel price is 150 naira and 54 kobo. That is at the NAFEX rate. At the parallel market rate, it closed at 443 per dollar. It gives you 172. So we are a little bit in the middle, about 408 naira per dollar. If you look at what we're paying for fuel at 159. Ghana has just one refinery. They have the Tema oil refinery. The capacity for that refinery in Ghana is 45,000 barrels per day. That is 10% of the combined capacity, potential capacity for Nigeria's refineries here, which are moribund. They are not working. But if you want to say that, okay, let's assume that the refineries in Nigeria are only operating at 10% capacity, that will equal what Ghana's one refinery is doing. Ghana's fuel price, 85 cents on the dollar. At the NAFEX rate, you will be paying 328 naira per liter. At the parallel market rate, it will be 376. Cameroon also has just one refinery. This is the Sonara refinery. Their capacity is 42,000 barrels per day. Again, you're looking at a proxy of about 9.5%, almost 10% to the potential capacity of our refineries here in Nigeria. Cameroon's fuel price is $1.13. At the NAFEX rate of 386, that would be 436 naira per liter. At the parallel market rate, that would be 500 naira per liter. Namibia has no refineries. Mali has no refineries. In fact, Namibia spent in 2018, they spent $11.4 billion importing on fuel imports, refined fuel into the country. There are some proposals for refineries in Namibia, but there are none. So if you want to use, if you say, okay, forget Ghana, forget Cameroon, let's use Namibia. Namibia is just, if you just take for the fact that they have no refineries, they are at 78 cents per dollar. 301 naira on the NAFEX rate in terms of what they're paying for fuel. Parallel market 345. Same thing with Mali. They don't have any refineries either, but they're at $1.21. So the point of all this is, who is sensitizing Nigerians to what we could potentially pay? And I haven't included the landing cost of PMS. I haven't included the storage cost. I haven't included the transportation cost to move fuel around the country, depending on what to move it to, the northeast, the other geopolitical zones. So if we wake up tomorrow morning and oil marketers are saying that fuel in Nigeria is 250 naira per liter, are we going to scream and say that and demonize them and say that they are trying to price gouge Nigerians? What are the metrics that we're supposed to use to be sensitized to know what it is we could possibly be paying now that we are fully deregulated and they will be sourcing for FX in order to bring fuel prices in? We move on from that to the Nigeria. This is Barnaby Pace. Barnaby Pace is an investigator, an international oil investigator with Global Witness. Global Witness, they are based in London. Let me just quickly read these two tweets. Nigeria is basically asking that Shell and Eni pay $1.1 billion in damages. There were court proceedings in Milan. This is the 4-year OPL 245 case that's been going on in Italy now, where Shell, Royal Dutch Shell and INI were alleged to have paid money into a government account and, essentially for OPL 245. So it says Lucia. Now, Lucia in that first tweet is Lucio Lucia. That's the lawyer for Nigeria arguing on behalf of Nigeria. Lucia argues that Shell and INI's illicit profits from OPL 245 are certainly higher than the 1.1 billion they paid, and the harm to Nigeria is also certainly higher. But for now, Nigeria asks that 1.1 billion is set as the minimum benefits the companies receive. It continues, Nigeria therefore asks to receive a minimum of $1.1 billion in damages from Shell, INI, and other defendants if convicted for their role in the OPL 245 deal. In addition, the UN Convention Against Corruption allows for assets to be returned to Nigeria by Italy. This is kind of similar to what's going on with the PNID case, where Nigeria got a judgment to get some more time. It's almost similar. The present administration is alleging that prior administration members colluded with, that's PNID. In this case, they colluded with OPL. I believe Dan Etete and his Malibu oil company is who's been fingered here. And then finally, the DMO released a press release, put out a press release yesterday. That's the Debt Management Office. Nigeria's debt as at June 30th has now risen to 31 trillion naira. This is the federal government, the states, the Federal Capital Territory. That's $85 billion. As of March 31st, it was 28.6 trillion, which is $78 billion. The increase is due to the IMF loan, new domestic borrowings, and I think one more thing was promissory notes to exporters or so. And that's our update.
Well, quickly, Rotus. Well, the comparisons you made between Nigeria and some other countries, Ghana, Mali, Namibia, I hope that we're not running the risk of comparing apples and oranges here. Those other countries, are they also oil-producing countries like Nigeria? And you say they have refineries. If we're comparing prices, maybe we compare Nigeria with similar countries that are also oil-producing, but they don't refine at home. That's one question that many Nigerians will probably ask, because you are more or less telling us that the way we are going, at the end of the day, we are not even paying enough for fuel, and we could end up going to the fuel station one morning, and Nigerians will be told to pay 400, 500 naira per liter. And the argument will be that, if you go to Ghana, they even pay more. I don't think that that is a very convincing argument.
Right, so, Doctor, here's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have fully deregulated the downstream sector. Mm-hmm. If you listen to an official from the PPPRA, we played it here on Arise News, he said that if I'm an oil marketer, I cannot sell fuel for less than the cost at which I acquired it, which is your cost of goods sold, your second line item on your income statement. So what I'm saying is, if just using the exchange rates, if an oil marketer, if all of us here decide to go and import oil, the cost at which we bring fuel into the country, if you just use that cost as a metric, the fuel cost is higher than what it is right now at 159. The 159 naira per liter is at a rate of 408 naira per dollar. So what I'm saying is that if you just use exchange rate, I have not included, as I said, transportation costs, landing costs, a whole number of other costs, haulage, storage. If you just use that cost, what will we be paying? So what I'm asking is, I think the group managing director, Mele Kyari, I think I saw him on television somewhere yesterday, the day before. He was doing that where he was breaking down what it costs to put together this, what it costs. So as an oil marketer, if you are free and you are no longer restricted by the price bands of the PPPRA, what should Nigerians expect to pay? So I'm just using those countries as a proxy for what we could expect. We have to be, Nigerians have to be sensitized.
Okay, Rotus, we'll continue this debate, definitely. This debate goes on and on. It's a great debate, Thank you so much. Moving on to the business update, Michael Wilson joins us from London. Hi, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Asia Pacific first, and relatively neutral. The Nikkei up about 0.5%, Kospi up about 1%, Shanghai Composite about 1%. The big exception is in Indonesia. Jakarta has reinstated a partial lockdown, and shares are down 5% there. Australia, all ordinaries up a modest 0.5%. Remember, Australia into recession officially last week, as is said. So basically, basically, as appears to be Asia's wont about all this kind of stuff, regional markets moving very circumspectly. It's a two-way street. It's not been mirroring Wall Street's gains or sell-off. And whilst everybody appears to be going to get long as they were yesterday, Asia didn't. It just stripping out the high-tech stuff. Equity markets in Europe and the United States had rallies yesterday. Huge amount of interest in tech stocks, of course, in the United States. Amazon, Apple, Microsoft set the tone for equities really across the board. The Nasdaq up nearly 3%. That will all change. And very choppy markets expected today ahead of the main events. Number one, the European Central Bank meets, and that there won't be any change in their interest rates. But the major interest is going to be the press conference after their noon decision, their noon announcement of what they haven't done, if you see what I mean. And we're going to get a view from the European Central Bank about the strength of the various European economies. Latest manufacturing data from Spain and France showed negative growth, a contraction in the services industry in Spain and Italy. You'd expect that because of the constraints on tourism right now. And really, that's what we were looking for, some kind of commentary from the European Central Bank with all its tentacles into the various countries within the EU to find out what's being happening. And also, the euro's been quite strong, rather annoyingly for Europe, and maybe the ECB will try and talk it down slightly. Sterling under pressure yesterday for all those kind of reasons, so got a lot going on here. Japan trade talks, EU, come on to that in a second, US trade talks as well. The latest twist, basically, in this renegotiation of the international law, which is annoying a lot of international lawyers and a lot of people in Europe. Commissioners coming into London to talk about it today. In the US, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, has said, if there's any overlap into the Good Friday Agreement of all those years ago, then there will not be a bilateral trade deal between the United States and the UK. I'll have more on that if you wish, but for the moment, let's go to the US jobless claims. Initial claims, weekly ones today, 850,000 last week. We'll see about that. It may give us a kind of weekly indication about the strength of the US economy. I have to say I do prefer the monthly ones, but there we are. As far as commodities are concerned, copper, platinum, palladium, oil, silver and gold, a good feel-good factor in stocks, and that pulled everything up. Basically, that is your global view.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Michael. I just want to make an emotional appeal, and I'm happy that Nancy Pelosi has started talking about that conversation, about the Good Friday Agreement and about the negotiations with the EU. I remember that agreement very well. 12th of April, 1998. A lot of people worked on that agreement. Some are dead now. David Hume of blessed memories and some other people. That agreement brought peace to that region. Let's not use business and politics to destroy that agreement. Likes of Martin McGuinness died on that agreement. Let's keep Europe intact, and Boris Johnson should learn accountability. You told the British people something else during the elections. Now you're saying something else now. Secondly, I want to also make a quick point on the Eurozone. And I want to ask about the 750 billion stimulus package. When is the money getting out? A country like France needs it, for instance.
Are you talking about the European rescue package?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So where that is at the moment is the implementation of it is still some way off. It's very, very small amount of money, and it doesn't even parallel what, for example, the likes of Germany and France are doing to their own economies, never mind what the European Central Bank is doing, nor does it particularly address the difference between a grant and a loan. The frugal northern countries of the EU would prefer loans to be put down to the southern, more profligate, as they they see them, states and the fringe states as well, rather than grants. In other words, a loan being something that which has terms attached to it and has a time limit attached to it. There's still an enormous amount of debate going on. Back to the Good Friday Agreement, yes, I'm sure a lot of people think that the government here has said that, yes, that initial withdrawal agreement was done, as they put it, at pace. In other words, quickly. And you can read into that as you will. I read into it that it was a political convenience to get it done to win an election, and now they're looking at what they say are grey areas, what a lot of people who understand all about this think are actually quite fundamental differences. As far as the United States is concerned, they have always had a soft spot for Ireland, which I don't think is totally justified, and for Northern Ireland and for the peace agreement as well. I understand what happened on Good Friday because I, like you, lived through it, but at the same time, things move on, and we have to consider the European Union as a whole and its bilateral and its multilateral trade agreements with the United States. I think Nancy Pelosi is taking the view that a lot of Democrats do. They feel in their heart of hearts that they are slightly Irish. I think that they need to move on and grasp the political realities of what's actually happening. And to say that there will not be a unilateral or bilateral trade deal between the UK and the US if these negotiations are not settled, I think is just talk. There will be an agreement. It'll just take some time.
Michael, let's talk about the U.S. job numbers very quickly. We're seeing new hirings. Is the U.S. out of the woods? As we also have that lingering consensus yet to be met at the House of Congress, at the Congress.
Well, you've answered your question, of course, yes. I mean, there is the threat of long-term unemployment. That's the important thing. And secondly, the hirings are complicated by seasonal factors as well. This will be the second week of numbers that have been adjusted seasonally to take into account of different ways that people have of hiring people within seasons. As far as the stimulus package is concerned, we're no closer to agreement on that. The problem is that if these job figures are relatively good, I mean relatively good, I lay an awful lot of stress on the word relatively, then there's not the push to get the stimulus deal agreed, because politicians will move on. I still maintain that if I were a US politician and I was standing up for re-election on November the 3rd, I would want to be able to say to my voters, this is what I did to get this deal done. And so far, we're not hearing a lot of that. I feel somehow that given the Labor Day holiday is now out of the way in the United States, then something may move, but we're still a long way away.
Well, thank you, Michael Olsen.
All right, thank you so much for that, Michael. For an update on COVID-19, Aaron Akirajala is here with us, the Baron himself. Aaron.
Hello, Aaron.
Right, let's start it off from the outlook of things in terms of COVID-19. And today, we've actually crossed another grim milestone, understanding that over 900,000 cases have been recorded, or rather, over 900,000 deaths have been recorded from COVID-19 and its related illnesses. As you can actually see there, the cases actually are 27.8 million plus of cases, up by 5%, but the deaths are also up by 8%, which is kind of worrying if you'd ask me. Over 900,000 deaths have been recorded right about now. Yesterday alone, 6,330 deaths were added to the number, which took it past that particular grim milestone. It has taken 9 months to get to this, but I must say it's really, really sad what is happening in terms of them. Moving on, let's actually just look at it. We've spoken about some places where the deaths are spiking: Ecuador, Bolivia, Paraguay, and the Dominican Republic. We're seeing rises in the number of deaths being recorded in those places. Although in the US, which has the most amount of deaths, things are beginning to flatten. Moving on to the next graph, it actually shows how things have been progressing. At a certain time, the worst periods happen to have been April and May in terms of deaths from COVID-19. And at the moment, we're beginning to see, I don't know whether to say it's a flattening of the number of deaths, of the number that are coming in. Now, we must actually know that scientists and those that are tracking this data are saying that for some underreporting and also inconsistent in receiving data means that this particular figure might even be more. And when you look at this, speaking about the U.S. and how things have actually played out in the U.S. in terms of deaths, we know they have well over 190,000 deaths in the U.S. This comes on the back of certainly what Donald Trump has said yesterday and his admittance of a very, very big lapse in judgment or an error in his decision-making, understanding that at some point he chose to downplay the severity of this virus. And maybe at that time it might have been understandable, but with the way things have actually blown out in the U.S. with 6.3 million cases recorded and counting, and with over 190,000 deaths, certainly it was a huge lapse in judgment. Maybe they might have done better, maybe they might have even handled it better, and maybe the fear factor might have even worked. Who knows right now? And that's something he would have to live with, and maybe will have on his conscience. And let's see how it will impact on election come November. But moving away from that, we spoke about the AstraZeneca case yesterday, whereby they halted trials for that particular vaccine, talking about the AZ-1222. But now the man that was responsible for them halting it down, talking about Joe Walters, has actually spoken, and he has said that he feels bad about it, but without a doubt, science remains science. When things like this happen, which scientists are saying that is actually natural, certainly you would have to just simply go along. And he said that, speaking to some journalists, he said that he actually developed some symptoms which were expected, because they told him that he would actually experience pain after taking the first shot and later on experience fever. And he did experience the fever. He went away after some days but returned. And from findings, they found out that that particular fever turned out to be an inflammation which was called transverse myelitis. So that is what he was suffering from, and because of that they had to stop that particular vaccine, and they are beginning to review data once again by independent bodies, and let's see what becomes of that AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford vaccine. A lot of hope had been put there. Billions had been poured into those pharmaceuticals to see how fast they can get a vaccine. How this will slow down the timeline is left to be seen. Since you're speaking about vaccine, in Russia, the Sputnik 5 that we've been speaking about, which they say is being given authorization in Russia right now, they have told volunteers, if you are willing and you want to come and get the vaccine, come and get a shot. Remember, the Sputnik 5 is being given in two phases, the AD5 and the AD26. Although, because they say if you have resistance to the AD5, certainly the AD26 would actually kick in, which is the adenovirus there which we're speaking about. So let's see what becomes of that. Although 26 scientists have actually come out and said, reviewing the data that was published by the Gamaleya Institute, who are in charge of this Sputnik 5, shows that something is not right. They're saying that the data that they published, something is not right, that there is something missing there. Or the Gamaleya Institute responded in a statement by stating that the data they've actually put out to the Lancet and some other medical journals is the accurate data, and at the moment they are standing by what they have, and it actually does work. So there's still a lot of back and forth here in terms of this particular vaccine. We're still going to be seeing this, because remember, it takes about 5 years, at least 5 years, to get a vaccine. We are looking at a crash program, or the warp speed, Operation Warp Speed, like they're calling it in the US, of 18 months going 20 months. So certainly these things are only natural.
Well, what you were referring to is the protest by the 26 scientists.
Yeah.
Most of them are Italians. Yeah. And they were responding to the research article that the Gamaleya Institute published in the Lancet.
Yeah.
So their open letter was to the editor of the Lancet, the medical journal.
Yeah.
And what they were saying basically was that there were apparent duplications, that multiple participants in that trial with 76 persons indicated the same pattern of antibodies in multiple participants, and that, scientifically, that's quite not possible. But of course, you stated the response. But the thing, of course, is to be cautious. We keep saying that. All these emergency authorizations could be risky because of the side effects, the kind of side effect that we have seen in the example of Joe Walters that you cited. When I first saw that Russian story, the first thing that occurred to me when we were told that, okay, they are carrying out the phase 3 trials now in other countries, I thought maybe Nigeria would be part of it. There was a story about Nigeria receiving vaccines. from the Russians, although they've denied that. They now say what they received was just an aid memoir, whatever that means, with regard to vaccines. But Joe, what else that we talked about? Well, one thing that came out of that story is that for you to be able to, raise your immunity level against COVID-19, you have to take 2 doses rather than a single dose. And now this gentleman is saying that he will take the second dose despite the adverse reaction that he experienced. And I'd like to pose the question to you, Aaron. If you were in his shoes, will you go for that second dose, or will you even volunteer at all for testing?
Personally, I wouldn't, but I understand his thought, because some people are looking at the greater good, and some people are tailored mentally that way. I am not. I think personal. I think of a personal care first before looking at the greater good. So I will just leave it at that. But before I go quickly, let's actually talk about face masks, because at the moment Dr. Fauci in the US has still insisted that face mask is still the best way to actually combat or prevent COVID-19. And this graph by the WHO still states some of the things you need to do, some of the do's. Ensure you wash a mask if it's one of those cloth masks, and the ones that are disposable, ensure you dispose them properly, ensure you keep them safely to ensure that in the bit of trying to prevent COVID-19, you do not carry it yourself and actually harbor it.
In fact, I call those things the 1, 2, 3 of COVID-19. You must wear your face mask, you must sanitize as much as possible, and keep basic hygiene. I mean, it's really very important. But let me say something about the vaccine real quickly. There was a research done yesterday that says 65% of people say they think the vaccines are rushed. Only 35% of people are confident about what they've done so far with the vaccines. It was a research done in America. But thanks so much, Aaron. Really appreciate you for that. All right.